Emma Roberts stood at the firing line of Fort Carson's advanced marksmanship range, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight regulation bun as she struggled to align the sights on her M4 carbine. Around her, soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division watched with growing impatience as she fired another three-round group that scattered wildly across the paper target at a mere 100 yards. "Roberts, what the hell was that?" barked Master Sergeant Daniels, the senior marksmanship instructor, his voice carrying across the Colorado mountain range. "You're supposed to be teaching these soldiers, not showing them how to miss." The soldiers suppressed their laughter, but their sideways glances spoke volumes. How had someone so incompetent become an instructor at one of the Army's premier training facilities? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe that heroes come in the most unexpected forms, don't forget to subscribe. Emma lowered her rifle, her face flushed with embarrassment as she stepped back from the firing line. "I'm sorry, Master Sergeant. I'll do better on the next round." Her voice was barely audible over the intermittent gunfire from the adjacent ranges. At 34, Emma was the newest civilian contractor hired to supplement the base's marksmanship training program. But after 3 weeks on the job, the soldiers had taken to calling her Maggie's drawers behind her back, a reference to the red flag waved when a shooter completely misses the target. "There won't be a next round today," Daniels replied, checking his watch. It was 4:30 p.m., and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the range. "We're losing daylight, and these soldiers need actual instruction, not whatever this was." He turned to the group of 20 infantrymen waiting their turn. "Class dismissed. We'll try again tomorrow with a different instructor." As the soldiers packed up their gear and headed for the waiting transport trucks, Emma methodically cleared her weapon and began cleaning up her station. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who passed. This had become her routine: show up, fail spectacularly, endure the humiliation, and return the next day to do it all again. "Roberts, a word," Daniels called as she was about to leave. His tone had softened slightly, but his expression remained stern as she approached. "This isn't working out. I don't know who signed off on your qualifications, but it's clear you don't have the skills for this position." Emma nodded, her blue eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder. "I understand, sir. I'm recommending to Colonel Hayes that you be reassigned to an administrative role, somewhere you can't endanger these soldiers' training." He paused, studying her face for any reaction. "Unless you have something to say about it?" "No, sir. I understand completely," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "This would be the third reassignment in less than a year." Daniels shook his head, clearly perplexed. "What I don't get is why you're even here, Roberts. Your personnel file says you served 8 years active duty, including deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. You should be able to hit a target at 100 yards in your sleep." Emma finally met his gaze. "People change, Master Sergeant. Skills fade." "Not like this they don't," he muttered, but waved her off. "Report to Colonel Hayes at 8 a.m. for reassignment." As Emma walked away from the range, the weight of her failure pressed down on her shoulders. The cool mountain air carried the distant sound of continued firing from other ranges, a reminder of the world she once belonged to but could no longer seem to function in. Back in her small on-base apartment, Emma dropped her range bag by the door and headed straight for the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face, then stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the soldier she had once been. Her eyes, once sharp and focused, now seemed perpetually distracted, as if constantly looking for threats that weren't there. With mechanical precision, she changed out of her range clothes and into running gear. Physical exercise was the only thing that helped quiet the noise in her head these days. She laced up her shoes, grabbed her phone, and headed out for her nightly 5-mile run around the base perimeter. The rhythm of her footfalls on the pavement helped her focus, pushing away thoughts of another failed day. She had known this assignment wouldn't last. They never did, but she had hoped to make it at least a month before the inevitable happened. As she rounded the eastern fence line, her pace quickening with her frustration, she nearly collided with a group of officers walking in the opposite direction. "Watch where you're going," one of them called out as she swerved to avoid them. "Sorry, sir," she replied automatically, barely glancing up as she continued past. But something made her slow down and look back. One of the officers, a brigadier general by the stars on his chest, was staring after her with an odd expression on his face. Emma turned away quickly and picked up her pace, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. She didn't recognize him, but something about his reaction suggested he might have recognized her. That was never a good sign. By the time she returned to her apartment, darkness had fallen over the base. She showered quickly and was about to heat up a microwave dinner when a sharp knock at her door made her freeze. Military police rarely came with good news, especially after hours. She approached the door cautiously, checking through the peephole before opening it. Outside stood not MPs, but Master Sergeant Daniels and the Brigadier General she had nearly run into earlier. Her stomach dropped. "Miss Roberts," Daniels began formally. "This is Brigadier General Harrison. He's requested to speak with you." Emma stood at attention despite herself, years of military discipline kicking in automatically. "Sir, it—" The general studied her face for a long moment before speaking. "May we come in, Captain Roberts? Or do you prefer to be called by your civilian name now?" The use of her former rank sent a jolt through her system. She stepped back wordlessly, allowing them to enter the sparse apartment. There was nowhere to sit except the small dining table with its 2 chairs, so they remained standing in the cramped living area. "Master Sergeant Daniels tells me you've been having some trouble on the range," General Harrison said, his tone conversational, but his eyes sharp and assessing. "Yes, sir," Emma replied, unsure where this was heading but certain it couldn't be good. Had they discovered the truth about her? Was this the end of yet another attempt to build some kind of life after everything that had happened? "That strikes me as odd," Harrison continued, "considering that the last time I saw you shoot, you put 5 rounds through the same hole at 300 meters in a sandstorm." Emma's breath caught. She didn't remember him, but clearly he remembered her. "Sir, I—" "Master Sergeant," Harrison cut her off, turning to Daniels, "would you give us the room for a moment?" Daniels looked between them, confusion evident on his face, but he nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll be right outside if you need me." When the door closed behind him, Harrison's formal demeanor softened slightly. "It's been what, 3 years since Kandahar?" Emma nodded stiffly. 3 years, 2 months, sir. "And they still have you bouncing around from base to base, keeping you visible but useless." "It wasn't a question." "It's better than the alternative," she replied carefully. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a waste of one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege of commanding." Emma remained silent, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their trembling. "Do you know why I'm here at Carson?" he asked, changing tack. "No, sir. I'm heading up a joint task force on advanced infantry tactics. We're pulling together specialists from across the services to develop the next generation of close-quarters combat training." He paused, letting that sink in. "When I saw your name on the base personnel roster, I couldn't believe it. The Army had one of its most decorated combat veterans teaching basic marksmanship as a civilian contractor." Emma's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, sir, that part of my life is over." "Is it?" Harrison moved to the small kitchenette counter where Emma had dropped her keys and wallet earlier. Next to them sat her medication bottles, the daily reminders of what she had survived. He didn't touch them, just nodded toward them. "The physical wounds heal, Captain. It's the others that take more time." "Some never do," she replied quietly. Harrison turned back to face her. "Tomorrow morning, instead of reporting to Colonel Hayes, I want you to meet me at Range Complex Bravo at 0600. There's something I need to show you." "Sir, I don't think—" "That's an order, Captain." His tone brooked no argument, despite the fact that he technically couldn't give her orders anymore. 6 a.m. Don't be late." After he left, Emma sank onto one of the dining chairs, her appetite gone. She knew what would happen tomorrow. Another humiliation, another failure, another reminder of everything she had lost. But she also knew she would be there at 6 a.m. sharp. Some habits couldn't be broken, no matter how hard she tried. The next morning dawned clear and cold, typical for early spring in Colorado. Emma arrived at Range Complex Bravo at 5:45 a.m., her breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn air. The range was deserted, except for a single figure standing near the firing line, General Harrison in full combat gear rather than his service uniform. "Good morning, Captain," he called as she approached. "I appreciate punctuality." "Old habits, sir," she replied, eyeing the table beside him. On it lay an assortment of weapons, an M4 carbine similar to the one she had used yesterday, but also an M1110 semi-automatic sniper system, and what appeared to be a custom-built precision rifle she didn't immediately recognize. "I spoke with your doctors at Walter Reed," Harrison said without preamble. "They told me about your vision." Emma stiffened. "Then you know why I can't do this." "What I know is that the shrapnel damaged your right eye's ability to focus at certain distances. What I don't know is why a left-handed shooter, who always qualified expert with her non-dominant eye, is suddenly incapable of hitting a target. It's not that simple, sir." "Then explain it to me." Harrison picked up the M4 and held it out to her. "Show me." With reluctance, Emma took the weapon. The familiar weight of it in her hands sent conflicting signals through her body, comfort and terror simultaneously. She moved to the firing line, where targets had been set up at various distances. "The 100-yard target," Harrison instructed. "Take your time." Emma raised the rifle, trying to control her breathing as she had thousands of times before. But as soon as she began to sight down the barrel, it started. The shaking in her hands, the racing of her heart, the cold sweat breaking out across her forehead. The target blurred, not from her physical injury, but from something deeper, something the doctors at Walter Reed hadn't been able to fix with surgery or therapy. She squeezed the trigger anyway. The shot went wide. "Again," Harrison said calmly from behind her. She fired twice more, each shot missing by a wider margin than the last. Frustrated, she lowered the rifle. "It's not your eye," Harrison observed. "No, sir." "Tell me what happens when you aim at the target." Emma hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it anymore. "I don't see the paper target. I see faces, the faces of the men I killed, the faces of the team I lost. Sometimes both at once." Harrison nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "How long has it been since you fired a weapon in a real-world situation?" 3 years, 2 months, and 6 days, sir." "The ambush in Kandahar province?" "Yes, sir." Harrison was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Do you know what this is, Captain Roberts?" Emma shook her head. He opened it to reveal a medal she had only seen in photographs and museum displays, the Medal of Honor, the highest and most prestigious military decoration awarded to members of the United States Armed Forces. "This was supposed to be presented to you at the White House 2 years ago," Harrison said, his voice solemn. "But you disappeared from Walter Reed before the ceremony could be arranged. By the time they found you again, you had refused the honor and requested that the entire incident be classified." Emma's throat tightened. "Those men died because of me, sir. I don't deserve a medal for that." "Those men died because you were ambushed by a superior force while on a classified reconnaissance mission. What happened next is why this medal exists." Harrison closed the box and returned it to his pocket. 12 men survived that day because of what you did. I know because I was one of them." Emma's head snapped up, really looking at him for the first time. The recognition finally clicked. He had been the colonel in charge of the Joint Special Operations Task Force, the one who had been critically wounded in the first moments of the ambush. "You shouldn't have come back for us," he said quietly. "The mission parameters were clear. If compromised, the intelligence took priority over personnel." "I couldn't leave you there," she replied, the memories she had tried so hard to suppress rushing back. The hidden mountain pass, the sudden explosion that had separated her from the main group, the realization that the intelligence they had been sent to gather had been bait for a trap. The 12 men, including her commanding officer, pinned down with no hope of extraction. "No, you couldn't," Harrison agreed. "Instead, you moved to higher ground, established a sniper position with your spotter's rifle after he was killed, and held off over 40 enemy combatants for 3 hours until air support could arrive. You took a bullet in the shoulder, shrapnel in your face and right eye, and still managed to maintain fire discipline in communication with headquarters. When the medevac couldn't land because of enemy fire, you single-handedly cleared the LZ while bleeding out." Emma closed her eyes against the memories. The crack of the rifle, the recoil against her injured shoulder, the radio calls becoming increasingly desperate as the wounded bled out around her commanding officer. The final desperate charge down the hillside, when she heard the helicopters approaching, but knew they wouldn't land under such heavy fire. "I did what anyone would have done," she said finally, the words automatic, rehearsed from countless debriefings and therapy sessions. "No," Harrison said firmly, "you did what only you could have done, And then you came home and couldn't forgive yourself for surviving when others didn't. Emma had no response to that. It was the truth she had been running from for 3 years. The doctors tell me there's nothing physically preventing you from shooting as well as you ever did, Harrison continued. Your right eye has some limitations, but your left is perfect, and it was always your dominant shooting eye anyway. It's not about the eye, sir. I know, it's about this. Harrison tapped his temple, the same place where all great shooters make their most difficult shots. The difference is, right now your mind is working against you instead of for you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm not here to force you to accept the medal, Captain. That's your choice. But I am here to tell you that the Army needs you, not as a civilian contractor failing at basic marksmanship instruction, but as the soldier you truly are. I'm not that person anymore, Emma whispered. Yes, you are. You're just afraid to let her back out. Harrison gestured to the weapons on the table. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., no audience, no pressure, just you and the targets. I think you'll find that when it really matters, when lives are actually on the line, those hands won't shake and those ghosts won't interfere. He started to walk away, then paused. One more thing. There's been chatter about a potential security threat to the base. Nothing concrete, but enough that we've increased patrols, just something to be aware of. As he disappeared down the range road in his staff car, Emma was left alone with the cool morning air and the weight of everything he had said. She looked down at her hands, steady now that the rifle was no longer in them, and wondered if he could possibly be right. The next morning, Emma arrived at Range Complex Bravo at 5:45 a.m. again, half expecting Harrison not to be there. The whole encounter some kind of stress-induced hallucination, but he was waiting, the same weapons laid out on the table. Good morning, Captain, he greeted her, just as he had the day before. Shall we begin? This time, when Emma picked up the M4, she closed her eyes first. She took 3 deep breaths, centering herself the way she had been taught in sniper school. When she opened her eyes and raised the rifle, she focused not on the target itself but on the fundamentals, her stance, her grip, her breathing, the pressure of her finger on the trigger. The first shot went wide, but not by much. Again, Harrison said. The second shot was closer. Once more. The third shot hit the outer ring of the target. A small smile crossed Harrison's face. Now the 200-yard target. By the end of an hour, Emma was hitting center mass consistently at 300 yards with the M4 and making headshots at 600 yards with the M11. It wasn't her best performance. That would take more time and practice. But it was a far cry from the complete incompetence she had displayed the day before. Well done, Captain, Harrison said as she set down the custom rifle after her final series. I think we can safely say the problem isn't your ability. Emma nodded, a strange mix of emotions washing through her pride in what she had just accomplished, shame at how far she had fallen, and something else she hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. What happens now? She asked. That depends on you, Harrison replied. I have authorization to offer you a position with my task force, not as a civilian contractor, but as a reinstated captain in the United States Army, if that's what you want. Before Emma could respond, the sharp crack of gunfire echoed from the direction of the main base, not the controlled fire of a range exercise, but the rapid, chaotic bursts of combat. Harrison's radio crackled to life. General Harrison, this is base security. We have an active shooter situation at the main gate. Multiple casualties reported. All personnel are ordered to shelter in place. Harrison grabbed the radio. This is Harrison. What's the situation? 3 armed individuals breached the gate checkpoint at 0712. They've taken hostages in the visitor center and are demanding the release of prisoners from Leavenworth. Base is on lockdown, and SWAT is en route from Colorado Springs, ETA 25 minutes. Emma was already moving, checking the M110 and selecting a box of match-grade ammunition from the table. The visitor center is visible from the water tower on the east side of this range, she said, her voice calm and professional in a way it hadn't been since before Kandahar. I can be in position in under 5 minutes. Harrison looked at her, a question in his eyes. You said it yourself, sir, she replied to the unasked question. When it really matters, when lives are actually on the line, she let the sentence hang unfinished as she slung the rifle over her shoulder. Harrison nodded once, then spoke into the radio. Security, this is Harrison. I'm deploying a counter-sniper to the east water tower. Hold your positions and do not engage until my command. As Emma jogged toward the water tower, rifle secure against her back, she felt a clarity she had thought was lost to her forever. The ghosts were still there. They always would be, but now they were watching over her shoulder rather than standing in her way. She had spent 3 years running from who she was. Now it was time to remember.